Welcome to Intellectual Dissatisfaction. We're building this interview series around nonpartisan political journalism, fair questions, concrete answers, and enough detail for voters to make up their own minds. Today, we're speaking with Amanda Potter, a Democratic candidate for South Dakota House District 9. Amanda, thanks for being here. Our goal today is simple. We want viewers to leave knowing who you are, what you actually want to do in Pierre, and how you'd represent people in District 9 who may not already agree with you. So, why don't you take some time and tell the viewers about yourself, your personal background, your work history, and anything else you'd like them to know.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it and the opportunity to reach out and tell my story a little bit. So my name's Amanda Potter, like you said, and I am not a Sioux Falls native. I moved here in 2005 from North Dakota. But I've been here over 20 years and it truly feels like home. I love the people, I love the city, and I've seen so much growth and so much change over the last 20 years. So it's just been a great place to call home for myself and my son. Yeah.
Awesome. So I guess for now we could touch on some of your key areas that you want to focus on with your campaign and your candidacy. I know that you... on your campaign website, you list education as a main focus, workforce development, transparent government, affordable health care, and child care. Do you want to speak on any of those things? Which one might be like the main focus?
Yeah.
Anything like that?
I mean, they're all the main focus, right? And I think affordability is on top of everyone's minds right now when we're looking at property taxes that keep going up, the cost of groceries, the cost of gas. Childcare, as you know, is prohibitively expensive. I mean, something's got to give. And I really believe that government has an obligation to help the people that are funding it, right? And that's what I'm not seeing a lot of in Pierre and what I want to see done differently. Specifically about education, I'll talk about that since Secretary DeVos was just in our state. She talked about wanting to move from federal education funding to block grant funding. And I actually used to be a grant writer for nonprofit childcare and education. So I know a little bit about this topic. And I cannot tell you what a terrible idea that is, because that turns funding that should be for everyone and for all students equally into a competitive process where larger school districts and school districts with maybe a little more political capital potentially have the ability to be favored. And what happens with grant money? It goes away. And we also know, basically it's money from the federal government with a promise from the state that they're going to spend it on education. Well, I hate to say it, but we've seen how good our state is at fulfilling those promises. So I just think ideas like that maybe seem like a good idea on the surface really need to be looked at carefully, and they need voices like mine, voices of experience and reason to kind of poke the holes in them and make sure that they make sense for South Dakota.
Sure. So I guess considering that, when you get in, if you get elected and you take that seat, like what would be your first step in combating something like that?
Absolutely. I think the money that we have and the money that we're getting in really needs to be spent and given back to the people. Of course, we have to be judicious about it. We have to be good stewards of what we have, right? But we have been sitting on a surplus for years now, this rainy day fund. And when are we in a rainy day? That's what I would love to know. When we have people who are struggling, when we keep taking away services and taking away services, and people really need help, and more of the federal money isn't coming through, or we're refusing to take it as a state. So at what point do we say we're going to step in and help people?
Sure. Because
they're paying us. They're giving us money every year. They deserve to get something back.
Absolutely. So nonpartisanship is a topic that I believe is very important in today's political climate. It's social media is a fun place at times. And it's concerning to myself and concerning to a lot of people. I think that it seems as time goes on, the parties have a harder and harder time working together.
For sure.
And you said that you describe yourself as a practical, nonpartisan policies and working across differences,
For sure.
political differences. So can you define what that means to you and how that would translate? Say, like, where would you break with Democrats and where would you expect Republicans to meet you in the legislature?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it has become so polarized, right? And there's been this narrative of us versus them. And I hear a lot of it here in South Dakota, this narrative of, well, we've always been red, we've always been Republican. That's not going to change, but that's not true. As recently as 15 years ago, we had Democratic representation not only in Pierre, but on a national stage. We had Herseth, we had Daschle and Johnson. So for people to say that this is a one-party state, that's just patently false. I think what we saw was, again, that polarization and that narrative that was fed to us that people profited from, i.e. Fox News and the others, that there's right and wrong and there's us versus them. When really we're both sides, or all people, I truly believe we're working towards a common goal, right? We want to be able to live the American dream. We want our families to thrive. We want our kids to grow up in safe environments with good educations. It's just that the way that we go about doing it can be quite different. But I found in my own background, through working in corporate America and as an educator, that really communicating and talking to people and moving past assumptions is critical. And that's what I would really lean on. I also really look for win-win solutions whenever possible. I grew up on a wildlife refuge in North Dakota. My dad worked for the federal government. And you can probably imagine, in the midst of farm country and coal country in North Dakota, being a federal employee is not super popular.
Sure.
It wasn't a very great thing.
Yeah.
But he had to work with farmers all the time, to work on easements and to work on crop rotation programs. And growing up watching him work with people that just saw this, liberal environmental guy from the Pacific Northwest and get things done, really just shaped who I am and
Sure.
how I see that work can be done, even with people who feel like they're very different from you or that their viewpoints are very different from yours.
Absolutely. Great. So do you think that in the South Dakota House, do you think that you're gonna have a difficult time working with, your Republican counterparts, or what are your feelings on that?
From what I see, there's a little bit of everything, right? There's some folks in the House, if they come back, they're very extreme, and they can be very divisive, and it doesn't seem like they're open to working with you, but I'm sure there are plenty of others who are. And I look at what Caden Whitman did in this last year with funding for expanding free and reduced school lunches. That was a bipartisan effort, right?
Yeah.
And so if she had just listened to the naysayers and written it off and said, I can't work with these people, it never would have happened. But she is so good at developing relationships and working her channels and working with people to champion these things that are good for all of us. And I really take a lot of inspiration from that.
Awesome. Yeah. I found her, she did a great job. She's the representative for my district too.
Yeah.
So I was pretty pleased to see that she got that through. So let's talk a little bit more about education. Your website says schools need strong state partnership and freedom for educators to do their job without political overreach.
Yep.
What exactly counts as political overreach in your mind?
Yeah. I think when we have our legislature or a tightly controlled group of non-experts speaking into curriculum and what should be taught and what shouldn't be taught, that is how I define overreach. I think we should define what should be taught, and we should look at standards and best practices, but it should be educational experts. It should be people in the field.
Sure.
And that's not what we've seen in the past, and it's disheartening, truly.
So where would you, or how would you legislate to prevent that overreach?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And I think that's one of the places where I would need some mentorship and I would need to work with people who have worked within the system. But I think one of the obvious answers is you need people who are experts in their room.
Sure.
And so whether that's legislated or not, you need the committees who are advising, the committees who are working on curriculum and other questions to be made up of people within the education sphere.
Sure.
That's really important. And however it looks like that you legislate that or make a rule out of that, it's just really important. That's the right people in the room at the table.
So being able to make connections with the right people and bring them in to help
For sure.
legislate or help
Yeah.
draft. Sure.
And make
absolutely.
sure they have a voice, right?
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a token representation.
Right.
Yeah.
So speaking of education, funding is important when it comes to education, as we spoke about before. Your website also emphasizes thriving communities and affordable childcare for families.
Yep.
But if the budget is tight,
Yep.
which comes first for you in practice? Childcare affordability,
Yep.
school investment, healthcare access, or property tax relief?
Woo! You're asking me a rank, aren't you? That's a tough one. That is a really great question. I think education and families are so important. They're so important to almost all of us. And even if you don't have kids, even if you don't have kids who are in the school system, you benefit from kids who are well educated, who are taken care of, with families who can work. Most of our families, are two-parent households that both people work, and they need to have affordable childcare in order to do so. And that's a net good for all of us. That's a net positive for all of us. Do we need affordable health care? Of course. But I work in the healthcare industry, and I know that with the way things work with insurance and things like that, that is a much bigger task to tackle.
Right.
But I think education funding and child care funding are things that can be done at the state level. They can be tackled, and they should be tackled.
Awesome. You spoke at the No Kings protest.
Yeah.
And you gave a pretty decent speech. I enjoyed it,
Thank you.
So one of the things that you said in your speech was that you kind of frame yourself as a citizen or a neighbor rather than a politician.
Yep.
And you called people to action.
Yep.
If you get elected, how do you keep that posture without becoming just like another partisan voice in Pierre?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the important thing is serving in Pierre is going to be an important part of my life, but it will not be my whole life. I don't anticipate being a career politician, to be honest. I'm looking to serve a term or two and then stepping aside and letting someone else take that role. I have a day job. I have to work. I have a 9-year-old child. I have so much outside of this one aspect, and while it's very important to me, and it's something I will give myself to wholeheartedly, there are a lot of other things that I want to do and a lot of other areas where I want to make a difference. So this is not going to be a career for me.
In that same speech that you gave at the No Kings protest, you spoke on apathy. You said that apathy helps the people who benefit from the status quo.
Yeah.
In South Dakota terms, who are you talking about?
Yeah. So it's John on 3rd Street. No, just kidding. I really think it's broader. And for a while, I did work in the media world. I worked for a telecom. And what I saw specifically was how certain media entities truly profit off of dividing us, off of making us angry, and off of making us feel like there's nothing we can do other than watch their channel. And that is terrifying. I'll give you a really good example. So there was every year, if you have cable, you probably notice your bill goes up, and that's because every year they have to renegotiate with channels, and the channels say, this is how much you have to pay to carry us, and the cable company says, yes, we can do that, or no, we can't do that. There was a channel who wanted to be carried, It was a very, I'll be honest, far-right, politically aligned news channel, not Fox News, even further right. And they said, hey, we think you should carry us, but this is how much we're going to charge you. And it is an exorbitant amount. The company said, no, we can't do that to our customers.
Sure.
So this channel started a campaign against the cable company, geo-targeted to the region where it serves, saying, your cable company doesn't want you to see news about Donald Trump. It's censoring us. It doesn't want you to know what's really going on in the news. It worked.
Wow.
We had so many calls, we had so many social media messages, and people just fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. And I just sat there going, if you knew how much money they stand to make off of your outrage, I mean, it's disgusting, but I think people just don't see that.
Sure. So then I guess, how would you relay that kind of message to your constituents?
Yeah.
In a way that they would understand and that maybe would motivate them.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's hard because you don't want to admit that you're wrong, right? And I would encourage anyone on any side to really, truly follow kind of the money trail.
Sure.
Or ask themselves, what is this person or this company getting out of what they are feeding to me or the reaction they're trying to get from me? Do they want me to buy something? Do they want me to subscribe to this thing? Once you start following those money trails, I think things become a lot more clear.
So do you think you see kind of the similar concept that you just described in government? And if so, how would you maybe address that? Because I know government transparency is kind of one of the big topics for you. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where we get into discussions about things like Citizens United, where we have corporations that can give thousands, millions, billions of dollars to a politician. How do you stay neutral in the face of that? Like, as a human, how do you stay neutral? And so, that's more on a federal level, but I think being transparent about where your funding is coming from and who you are answering to is really important. All of my funding is grassroots. I truly answer to the people who elected me. And I just think that that's really important.
Awesome. So being politically active, that's a topic that, for me, like with my friends that I know, I got some friends that are, they just could care less. That's just not what they're about. They don't think it's worth their time. They think it's all for naught. And then I have some that are, real gung-ho about it. And, I think that's great. But what, if you were to get into power, how would you?
I don't know how much power I would have.
If you were to take that seat in the House, is there a legislative version of the message that would urge people to vote, to support local candidates, build community, and like what kind of legislation do you think you might be able to propose to support and strengthen civic trust or like local democracy? Yeah,
that's a really good question. I believe more in leading with a carrot rather than a whip. So, I want to encourage people and educate people, make them feel hopeful. I mean, what did Barack Obama do? He made people feel that hopey, feely thing, right? And people came out in droves because they truly believed in that vision, that change. With that said, by the same token, I don't think we should be putting barriers in front of people who do want to participate in civic engagement, notably elections, right? And we're seeing that here in South Dakota. I want elections to be fair and free and limited to citizens who are legally allowed to vote. But we do not need to put needless barriers in front of them in order to make that happen, when we really have no record of voter fraud in the state. So do you think that you would have opposed the bill to require? So is it for you, is it an issue of someone needing to show proof of citizenship to register to vote?
is it an issue of, like, you think that that's a problem, or do you think, like, where do you draw the line? Because I know some people feel as though requiring people to show proof of citizenship to register to vote should be a baseline protection, where past that point, you know, maybe there's a little bit more wiggle room. At least at that point, we know you're a citizen. Like, would you have opposed that?
I think people who think that, I totally understand where they're coming from. I'm from North Dakota. You don't have to register to vote in North Dakota, which is crazy, but there's only like 300 of us, so it's a little different in other places, right? But the fact is, you do have to register. There is records of who's voting. And the thing is, it's not that easy to get a record of your citizenship. People think it's just your driver's license, or it is just a passport. Maybe, maybe not. It depends. Does your name match what's on there? Do you have your birth certificate? Do you know where your birth certificate is? Do you have the time and the money and the wherewithal to be able to get the necessary paperwork that you need to do? It's a great example of what I like to call a solution looking for a problem.
Sure.
We don't have a problem with voter fraud. So tell me why we're legislating additional steps to make it harder for people to vote. That makes me real suspicious.
So are you opposed to ID being required to actually go and vote in person?
No, absolutely. No.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not opposed to showing who you are and that you can legally vote.
Sure.
Again, I want fair elections. I want only the people who are, allowed to vote, non-felonious citizens, to be able to vote. But I think, again, making up a problem in order to make it harder for actual citizens to vote, and seeing how it will disenfranchise women a lot of times, because a lot of women change their names when they get married, poor people who can't afford the fees, people in rural areas where you have to drive an hour or two to get your license or to get your passport. That's who it's going to hurt, and it's completely unnecessary.
Awesome. So, District 9 currently sends 3 Republicans to the legislature.
Yep.
What is one thing the current delegation is getting right, and what is one thing they are under prioritizing?
Oh, okay. Well, bless their hearts. I know Joy and Tessa, I think in particular, are pro-business. I know that I believe they're both business owners. I know Tessa is, she's one of the representatives, and I appreciate that. I think we should be uplifting small business and entrepreneurship, and that really is the fabric of a strong community. So I applaud them for that. I would love to see less focus on maybe what their own personal beliefs and opinions are, and maybe looking at what is good for the whole in the district. So, for example, maybe you don't like certain books in the library. Well, my answer to you is then watch what your children are reading. It's that simple. Have a little personal responsibility. Don't let your kids check out those books. But 2, like they did 2 years ago, to say that librarians should be fined, even jailed, for checking out certain books to kids. I mean, that's such a massive overstep to personal liberty just because of their own personal beliefs. I think that's such a narrow-minded view, and you really have to look beyond that at what's good for everyone.
Well, that's, I think that personal responsibility, especially for a lot of, Republican or right-leaning people, they like to say that that's something they believe in. So that's, it's I guess seems like a very important thing for you too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where else do you think personal responsibility could be applied, or rather than legislation? Yeah, that is a really good question. So offline you had asked me about gun ownership and gun control, and I think I have kind of a unique perspective in that area. I'm from the Dakotas. I grew up with hunting and within gun culture. Actually, kind of a funny
not funny story, but when my son was born, my dad was so excited and he said, "Can we take my guns and display them over his crib?" And I said, "No, we cannot." But that just shows, I mean, it's part of a culture that I grew up with and totally normal for families, kids. With that said, we know that gun violence and gun deaths are a public health issue. And it is especially a public health issue in rural areas, for men, and for veterans. But at the same time, in 1996, with the Dickey Amendment, we did away with any kind of funding that would allow public health, CDC, to do some research, to do investigations, and see what rules or what laws, what legislation might actually help with some of these public health issues, right? And this is something we did in other areas, like cars, right? We know cars hurt people. We know cars kill people. So what did we do? We got seatbelts. We mandated seatbelts. We have guardrails on steep roads. We put in backup cams after kids, unfortunately, were hit when people were backing up. We could do, and Dickey himself later came out and said this. He said it went too far, and that if research were allowed as a part of a public health discipline, we could find ways to make it safer, make gun ownership happen, not trample on the Second Amendment, but also mitigate some of the negative effects that we're seeing. And so I really would like to see us as a state put some money into researching violence, and specifically gun violence, especially since it is an issue in rural areas and in redder states, and say, hey, this is something we're prioritizing as a state, not because we want to take anything away from anyone. We want you to be able to keep your guns, but we also want people to stay safe.
So is that something you think that you'll push for in your, term? That
I would love to.
Sure.
Yeah.
So is that going to look like proposing funding for the research then, in like a funding bill then? Or
yeah, it could be funding, or it could just be the request for RFPs, request for proposals for groups who might want to engage in this kind of research. And let's see how we can partner with them to make that happen.
I guess since we're on the topic of firearms and Second Amendment, that was one of our community questions. So do you think where it stands right now in South Dakota with being constitutional carry state, you're not required to have a concealed license permit to conceal carry.
Yeah.
Are you in favor of that? Do you think anything needs to change in that area, or?
Yep. I think that's an area where, getting back to what we were talking about a little bit ago, there's a lot of personal responsibility, right? And I know most of the gun owners I know take that very seriously. They take hunter safety very seriously with their kids and having them go through that. At the same time, I'm not an expert in the area of knowing what will truly make a difference in safety for children and safety for people who are depressed, and all the things related to gun violence as a public health issue. So I would really want to talk to experts and see what maybe has worked in other states to bring gun deaths down.
So you're not going to be, pushing like the typical, Democrat message of like, we want to ban a specific firearm, or we want to do this unless you had some experts researching and providing you with the information that would, support that message.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I really want to see the research and the rationale behind it, and I want to see what's worked in other areas.
Sure. I guess, let me see here. I want to go back to the No Kings movement because I find it really interesting, when we posted our videos and stuff on Facebook and the responses that we got. It varies from like, awesome, I'm so glad to see Sioux Falls getting out there and making their voices heard, to, expletives and, I won't say it on camera, but, just some very not nice things and very just, no real thought behind, behind it. It's just criticizing for seemingly no reason. It almost seems like there's just like a little bit of that partisan party politics at play there. But almost, my experience when we covered the second Sioux Falls No King protest was that like I had a lot of people asking me, what is No Kings about?
Yeah.
A lot of people just play on the name No Kings, like, oh, we haven't had kings since 1776 or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like, there's obviously more to it. What do you want a moderate or conservative District 9 voter to hear when they see you, when they may have seen you on stage at the No Kings protest? And where do you think the movement or other movements go wrong with their messaging to people on the other side of the aisle that could help get the message across?
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I think it does get caught up in this polarized, messaging that we get from several different sides. And I think some areas where I can't say I necessarily have seen it, but I could believe that would happen is people in the No Kings movement falling into a bit of that, i.e. saying, if you don't understand what we're doing here, then you are other, you are bad, you are wrong. I can't have a conversation with you. When the fact is we're all on a journey, right? And I think probably a lot of us have seen our viewpoints and maybe our political ideas and thoughts have changed over the years. And why did it happen? It happened because of life experiences. It happened because the people we talked to and the people we knew in our lives. There is value in being able to talk to the other side. And I guess the reason why I was there and the reason why I'm running is I want people in District 9 to have a voice in their government. And I don't believe that they do now, at least not fully.
Sure.
And so even if you completely disagree with No Kings, even if you completely disagree with me, I want you to have a voice. And I want you to be able to talk to me or whoever your representative is and say, hey, these are my real concerns, whether it's gun control, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare. This is really what I'm thinking and feeling. And, what do you think? How can we work together on a solution?
Awesome. I guess to follow up to that, considering you have a full-time job, you have a child, you would be busy with going to peer and doing what you need to do there. How would you see yourself reaching out to the community, your district, your people in your district to hear what they have to say, to understand, what it is they feel needs to be changed or addressed?
I think the League of Women Voters and a few other organizations are really good about holding coffees or cracker barrels during session. And certain legislators don't participate in those. And I think that's a darn shame. You should be willing to show up and to listen to your constituents and listen to what they have to say. I think also we've all had the experience of writing or calling our representatives, whether it's on the national scale or the local scale, and just not hearing anything back or getting back a form letter. And I'm not saying that I will have the time to personally respond to every person who reaches out, but I do think it's important. And I do remember the few times on a local level when I did have my representatives respond, and it meant a lot to me, and it actually built a lot of trust and respect, even though we were on different sides of the issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would love to continue that as much as I'm able to.
So I guess I only really have one more question. It was the second community submitted question, and it has to do with the hyperscale data centers.
Yeah.
So there was the proposed project that was recently brought to the city council meeting. And from what I've heard and what I've read, it didn't sound like the people that showed up, their concerns weren't really listened to. They weren't heard. They were completely disregarded. And there's a lot of uncertainty, lack of clarity, not a whole lot of information being presented to the public about these data centers. And a lot of people feel like they're going up really fast and there's just no way to stop them. With South Dakota in mind and us being an agricultural economy, do you think that these hyperscale data centers pose some type of danger to our agricultural economy or the environment?
Definitely to the environment, absolutely.
Do you think you would oppose or try to stop, or where would you be, do you think, if you were in the legislature? What would you do to try to protect the agricultural economy?
Yeah. Here's my position, and it's the agricultural economy, but it's all of our lives, right? It's all of our quality of life, whether it's sound, whether it's, you know, the aquifer that we're sitting on that is going dry, whether it's the Big Sioux and using that water. These are all concerns that affect us in a very real way. At the same time, I'm a bit of a pragmatist, and I feel like this is a ball we see rolling down, and I don't know if they're stopping it. It might be stopping it in South Dakota, but then it goes to North Dakota, or then it goes to Minnesota. What I would love to see, and what I would strongly, strongly push for, because I feel very strongly about this, is if data centers come, and if they want to come and use our resources, then they need to make it a net positive for us and for the environment. So what does that mean? That means they need to build green infrastructure in, right? Yep. If they're going to use the Big Sioux for water, then they should be building in the infrastructure that they need to clean it. If they're going to be using energy, they better be putting solar panels up. And guess what? They can feed into our grid for us. So it becomes a net positive for us as well. And I did bring those concerns up to the city council, and it seemed like some of it they hadn't thought about before. Some things they had, especially with the water issue. It sounds like it's going to be a closed loop system, so it won't be using a ton of water. But I think there are ways that we can ask data centers to not only pay their own way, but to make it a net good for the people around them. Absolutely. I think the other thing that I'm really concerned about is these huge tax breaks for them. I am completely opposed to that. Again, when we have limited numbers of dollars and a lot of needs, I don't see where we would bring this in, and it brings very little employment and can really negatively affect a lot of people.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all we have for you tonight. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate
absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks.